A captivating Muslim nanny reveals her heartfelt confession of infidelity in this must-watch true story. Welcome to the raw and unfiltered confessions of infidelity. It all began on a balmy summer morning in Virginia. The air hung heavy with warmth, and I felt my scarf adhere to my neck as I lingered outside the unassuming brick house. This marked the beginning of my journey in America, a stark contrast to the dusty streets of Belka where my roots lie. Returning home. I never envisioned departing from my family or my little universe, yet life had a knack for throwing us curveballs. The Jacobs, an apparently ideal family of 4, were in search of a nanny. And I was in need of the funds. It wasn't merely about the paycheck, it was about demonstrating to my parents and siblings that I had the capability to succeed. To flourish in a land so distinct from my own. I was 33, single, and unapologetically self-reliant, a true exception among Jordanian women. Brianna Jacobs, the wife, exuded elegance and beauty. She donned fitted blouses and high-end heels that echoed against the marble floors of their expansive residence. She welcomed me with a friendly smile, her blonde hair neatly arranged in a bun, and spoke in that careful manner typical of Americans, as if each word held significant weight. Then there was Zach Jacobs, the spouse. He stood tall, exuding a natural charm that effortlessly made you feel comfortable. His sandy brown hair curled slightly at the ends, and his laugh lines suggested a man who had experienced joy, not merely stress. He remained mostly silent that day, merely nodding with courtesy as he offered me a cup of tea. Their children, Splendor and Emmanuel, were 5 and 3. Brimming with energy and an insatiable curiosity. I was, naturally, a bit anxious. I had never taken on the role of a nanny before. Yet Brianna confidently assured me that my experience as the oldest of 6 siblings would be more than adequate. She exhibited kindness, yet it was evident that she held herself to high standards. She presented me with a hefty binder filled with regulations, meal schedules, daily agendas, emergency contacts, and even guidelines for folding laundry. The initial weeks passed without any notable events. I would rise at 6 a.m., whip up breakfast, assemble Splendor's lunch for school, and engage Emmanuel until it was time for his nap. My days were brimming with storybooks, vibrant finger painting, and the joyful pursuit of Emmanuel around the backyard. At night, I would find solace in my small room in the basement. Weary yet satisfied. It was one afternoon, roughly a month into the job, when I became aware of Zach observing me. I was perched on the spill that Emmanuel had created with his juice box when I sensed his gaze upon me. "You're incredible with them," he remarked, leaning against the counter. I glanced upward, taken aback. "Thank you very much, kind sir. Please call me Zach," he said, a smile spreading across his face. I nodded, warmth flooding my cheeks. It wasn't merely his words, but the manner in which he expressed them, as if he truly believed in their significance. At home, men seldom addressed women with such warmth unless they had hidden intentions. Yet Zach appeared to be an exception. From that day, I started to pay closer attention to him, noticing how he consistently inquired if I had eaten lunch, how he generously offered to assist with the groceries, and how he would hang around in the kitchen while I prepared meals. Brianna, in contrast, frequently found herself absent, occupied with her demanding corporate career. "Do you never feel weary?" Zach inquired one evening while I was arranging the dining table. "Weary of what?" "Of catering to the needs of all." I shrugged. "This is my profession. I'm accustomed to it." "You don't need to be," he said, his voice gentle. His words resonated within me long after he departed the room. It felt unusual to be observed in such a manner. In my culture, women, yet Zach's words made me feel valued. I attempted to brush it aside, naturally. I reflected on my identity and the principles I hold dear. I was a woman of faith, deeply connected to my traditions. There were boundaries I could never breach, regardless of how gracious or charming my employer might be. However, as I would soon discover, life had different intentions. The summer seemed to go on forever, with days that were long and sweltering. Brianna's work trips became increasingly frequent, leaving Zach and me to manage the children on our own. Gradually, the lines started to fade. Initially, it was pure, filled with playful banter, fleeting looks, and laid-back chats that stretched on just a bit too long. Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware that I was navigating treacherous waters. I frequently recalled my mother's voice, firm and resolute. "Alia, keep in mind your true self. The world may try to lure you in. Yet it is essential to remain authentic to who you are." I had always taken the allure of contemporary life. However, Zach stood apart. On a rainy evening, the atmosphere changed dramatically. The children lay in slumber, the house enveloped in stillness, save for the gentle patter of rain against the windows. As I tidied the kitchen after dinner, Zach strolled in. "Could you lend a hand?" he inquired as he rolled up his sleeves. "No, it's fine, I'm nearly finished," I said, but he lingered regardless. We toiled in quietude for some time, the atmosphere thick with unvoiced thoughts. "Do you ever long for the comfort of home?" he inquired. "Each day," I acknowledged. "Yet I arrived here with a purpose." "You've given up so much," he remarked, his tone laced with respect. I gazed at him, taken aback. "What makes you say that?" "Because I perceive it. Your selflessness shines through, always prioritizing others and maintaining a quiet strength without a hint of complaint. It's uncommon." His words took me by surprise. No one had ever addressed me in such a manner before, not even in my hometown. I experienced an unusual blend of appreciation and remorse. As if I were violating something hallowed merely by paying attention. I dismissed the compliment, saying it was nothing special. "It is to me," he replied, his gaze meeting mine with intensity. In that instant, a change occurred between us. It was understated, nearly undetectable, yet there existed a connection, a spark, a silent acknowledgement of something neither of us dared to name. That night, I lay down with a weight on my chest, caught in the struggle between my beliefs and the undeniable emotions that were surfacing. I sought strength, clarity, and the courage to remain steadfast on the right path. Yet, beneath the surface, I sensed that my reality was on the brink of transformation in ways I could never have foreseen. Professionalism, that any transient bond one sensed with Zach would dissipate like a drifting cloud. Yet, existence is seldom that straightforward. Every day unfolded with fresh moments, minor and seemingly trivial at first glance, yet each one gradually wore down the barriers I had constructed around my heart. Brianna's absence turned into a habit. She was heading to conferences in New York, attending business meetings in Chicago, or enjoying overnight stays at luxury hotels I had only glimpsed in magazines. Zach assumed the role of the unwavering parent, while I took on the position of his companion in the everyday turbulence of raising Splendor and Emmanuel. The children cherished him. Splendor would nestle onto his lap during story time, her tiny hands gripping his shirt as he animatedly read aloud in whimsical voices. Emmanuel trailed behind him, echoing his every move. Shift. Observing them together, I noticed a facet of Zach that was gentle and open, and it awakened something within me that I couldn't quite identify. One afternoon, while I was folding laundry in the living room, Zach entered with a box in his hands. He placed it on the coffee table, saying, "I thought you might like this." "What is it?" I inquired, brushing my hands against my apron. He lifted the lid of the box, unveiling a collection of cookbooks. "I've observed that you've been experimenting with different recipes recently. I thought this could spark some inspiration for you." I gazed at him, utterly at a loss for words. The essence lay not in the gift itself, but in the sentiment that accompanied it. No one had ever seen the subtle details of my actions, much less valued them. "Thank you," I murmured, the words trembling as they struggled to escape my lips. It's nothing, he replied, yet the intensity of his gaze suggested a different story. That evening, once the children had drifted off to sleep, Zach and I found ourselves back in the kitchen once more. These tranquil moments following the day's turmoil had evolved into a sort of sacred practice. I was cleaning the counters when he began to speak. "Aaliyah, you put in an incredible amount of effort." I glanced upward, taken aback. "This is my profession." "No," he said, shaking his head, "you go above and beyond your duties. You show concern. You cherish these kids as if they were your own." "They're simple to adore," I remarked, attempting to divert the conversation. "Indeed, you are." The words lingered in the space between us, thick and fraught with tension. I stood still, uncertain of how to reply. "Aaliyah," I started, but he cut me off. "I'm sorry," he said hastily, "I shouldn't have mentioned that." "No, it's fine," I replied, even though it truly wasn't. We lingered in quietude, the gravity of his words bearing heavily upon us. I wished to express to him that he was mistaken, that I was not simple to love, and that I was intricate and imperfect, constrained by principles he could never grasp. Yet, I remained silent. The days slipped by in a haze. I attempted to persuade myself that everything remained the same, yet deep within, I understood it had shifted. Zach's presence permeated the atmosphere. His laughter resonated throughout the house, his fragrance hung in the atmosphere, and his voice replayed in my thoughts long after he had departed. I started to observe the subtle details about him, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he hummed softly while washing the dishes, and how he always ensured the kids said, "Thank you and please." He wasn't merely kind, he possessed a thoughtfulness that felt both rare and precious. One afternoon, while I was gently pushing Splendor on the swing in the backyard, Zach emerged with a tray of iced tea. "I thought you could use a break," he remarked, offering me a glass. "Thank you," I said, accepting it with appreciation. We lingered on the porch steps, observing the children at play. "Have you ever pondered the possibilities of what your life might have become?" he inquired abruptly. I gazed at him, taken aback. "What do you mean?" "If you had remained in Balka, if you hadn't made your way here." Acknowledged it constantly. "However, I arrived here with a purpose." "Have you discovered it?" he inquired, his eyes unwavering. I paused, uncertain of how to respond. "In certain respects, indeed. However, in some cases, it becomes intricate." He nodded, as if he grasped the concept fully. "Life certainly has its surprises, doesn't it?" "It does," I conceded, my voice scarcely rising above a whisper. For a moment, we lingered in silence, the atmosphere around us heavy with unexpressed thoughts. I wished to express to him the depth of my gratitude for his kindness, how his presence had transformed into a source of solace in a world that frequently seemed isolating and unfamiliar. However, I was unable to. I would not. That evening, I found myself wide awake in my room, gazing up at the ceiling. I reflected on my family back home, on my mother's heartfelt prayers and my father's serious admonitions. "Remain steadfast in your beliefs," they would often remind. "Always remember your true self." I longed to think I remained that girl, the one who prayed 5 times a day and wore her scarf with pride. Yet the reality was that I was transforming, and it filled me with dread. The following morning, I did my best to steer clear of Zach. I immersed myself in tasks, maintaining a low profile and concentrating my thoughts. Yet, as the afternoon wore on, evading him became an impossible task. He discovered me in the laundry room, sifting through a heap of garments. "Aaliyah," he murmured, his tone gentle. I kept my gaze down. "Absolutely. Are you all right?" "I'm okay," I replied hastily. Yet he remained unconvinced. "Please don't shut me out," he said, stepping closer. "I realize I overstepped my bounds." "It's not about you," I interjected, finally meeting his gaze. It revolves around my identity, my convictions, my spirituality. I comprehend, he remarked, yet the expression in his gaze revealed that he truly did not. How could he? I tried to speak, but the words stuck in my throat. I am unable to accomplish this. He nodded slowly, his expression heavy with remorse. I apologize, Aaliyah. I never intended to put you in an awkward position. I didn't, I replied swiftly. That is the issue. For a moment, we simply stood there, the silence enveloping us, conveying all the unspoken words we couldn't express. I'll give you space, he said at last. Thank you, I whispered, my voice quivering. As he exited the room, a surge of relief washed over me, intertwined with a lingering ache that eluded definition. The difficulty. That evening, I sought solace in prayer more fervently than I ever had in my life. I sought fortitude, direction, and the bravery to remain authentic to my essence. As I knelt on the floor, tears streaming down my face, a realization washed over me. I was not merely battling temptation. I was battling a part of myself that felt unfamiliar. The days following our discussion in the laundry room were filled with tension, yet still within the realm of manageability. Zach honored his commitment to allow me some distance, and I dedicated myself to redirecting my attention towards my work. I immersed myself in caring for Splendor and Emmanuel, organizing crafts and baking projects that kept us engaged from morning until bedtime. Yet, despite my hands being busy, my thoughts maintained a polite demeanor, seemingly aloof, and I assured myself that this was the most prudent path ahead. We might act as if nothing had transpired, as if the confessions exchanged in the laundry room were merely a fleeting lapse in judgment. For a time, it nearly succeeded. Then arrived the tempest. It was a Friday evening, just after sunset, when the rain started to fall. The thunder rumbled ominously, rattling the windows and surprising Emmanuel, who grasped my leg tightly while I tidied up the dinner table. No need to fret, Emmanuel, I reassured him, lifting him into my arms. It's merely a slight sound. Allow me to prepare you for a restful night, if that's all right. I took him upstairs, immersed in his favorite bedtime story. As the rain cascaded down outside. Once the children had drifted off to sleep, the storm intensified. The wind howled, and an unsettling stillness enveloped the house, contrasting sharply with the turmoil beyond its walls. I made my way downstairs, anticipating that Zach would be in his familiar place on the couch. Instead, I discovered him in the kitchen, gazing out the window with a glass of wine cradled in his hand. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and the gentle illumination of the kitchen light accentuated the defined contours of his jaw. He appeared lost in contemplation, and I lingered in the doorway, uncertain whether to break the silence. Me? Do you happen to indulge in wine? He inquired without glancing back, as though he could feel my presence. No, I replied, stepping into the room. It goes against my beliefs. He nodded, at last directing his gaze toward. I suspected as much. You stand out. Is that a negative aspect? I inquired, a faint smile playing at the corners of my mouth. Not at all, he replied, his tone gentle. It's invigorating. I occupied my hands with wiping down the counters, attempting to disregard how his words set my heart racing. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, and I sensed his gaze fixed on me as I toiled away. Aaliyah. He finally spoke after what felt like an eternity of silence. Indeed, I responded, my gaze fixed elsewhere. Could we have a conversation? I paused my movements and turned to look at him. Concerning what? Regarding us, he remarked, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, my heart racing. There is not. Us, Zach. So why can't I get you out of my mind, he inquired, moving in closer. Zach, please, I started, but he cut me off. I understand it's not right, he admitted, his voice quivering. I understand that I shouldn't feel this way. Yet I find myself unable to change it. I notice you daily, nurturing my children, transforming this house into a true home, and I. He paused, running a hand through his hair. I've never encountered anyone quite like you. My breath hitched in my throat. His words echoed the very things I sought to dismiss, the truths I convinced myself I didn't wish to confront. Yet, listening to their words now, voiced in the open, rendered it undeniable what was unfolding between us. Zach, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, you're married. A family is part of your life. I understand, he said, his eyes brimming with sorrow. Yet, Brianna is perpetually absent, constantly occupied, and when she does show up, it feels as though we are mere acquaintances. You are the sole person who evokes feelings too challenging to articulate. I stood still, caught in a struggle between the part of me that recognized the wrongness of the situation and the part that yearned to feel desired, valued, and acknowledged. Zach, I murmured. But it wasn't a request for him to cease. It was a completely different experience, a yielding. He bridged the gap between us, his lips finding mine in a kiss that began softly, then intensified as we surrendered to the feelings we had both been resisting for far too long. His hand glided to my waist, drawing me nearer, and I felt myself dissolve into him, losing sight of everything else. Brianna, the kids, my beliefs, my loved ones. At that instant, it was solely him. That night, our connection went beyond just a kiss. As the tempest howled beyond our walls, we stepped over a threshold that could never be undone. He guided me upstairs to his bedroom, his touch sparking a flame within me that I had never realized was there. I allowed him to remove my clothing, his hands reverently exploring every part of my body as if I were something divine. In his embrace, I experienced a sense of beauty, strength, and complete liberation. It was completely different from what I had envisioned back home. Intimacy remained an unspoken subject, a taboo that lingered solely in hushed tones behind shut doors. However, with Zach, it was distinct. He was observant, understanding, and fervent, evoking emotions in me that I had never imagined could exist. For the first time in my life, I experienced a profound sense of being wanted. As it came to an end, we found ourselves intertwined, the rhythmic patter of rain drumming against the windows. I was aware that I ought to feel guilty, perhaps even ashamed, and certainly disgusted with myself. However, I did not. Instead, I experienced an unusual tranquility, as if I had at last discovered the lost fragment of my being. The following morning, the weight of reality crashed down on me like a freight train. While preparing the children for breakfast, I steered clear of Zach's eyes, the burden of our actions heavy upon me. Yet, when he locked eyes with me and offered a subtle, knowing smile, I experienced that familiar surge of adrenaline I had felt the previous night. It didn't end there. In the coming weeks, we discovered ourselves capturing fleeting moments whenever possible, a lingering touch as we brushed past in the hallway, a hushed conversation in the kitchen after the children had drifted off, a swift embrace behind closed doors. Every time, I convinced myself it would be the final moment, yet it never turned out that way. Zach ensnared me completely, and I found myself utterly unable to break free from his allure. He caused me to lose sight of everything, my beliefs, my background, the principles I once cherished deeply. For a time, I allowed myself to think that we could maintain this, that we could thrive in our own secluded sphere without the outside world discovering our secret. Yet, beneath the surface, I understood that it was unsustainable, and when the inevitable collapse occurred, it would result in nothing but ruin left behind. The weeks that followed were a tempest, a haze of fleeting instances and hushed vows that infused my days with a blend of exhilaration and trepidation. Zach and I navigated our secret moments with a blend of caution and abandon, stealing time together in the quiet hours when Brianna was away, the children were tucked in, or the house lay still and empty. Every time our hands met, I convinced myself it would be the final moment, yet it never turned out that way. I sensed that I was navigating two distinct existences, Throughout the day, I embodied Aaliyah, the caring nanny who shared enchanting bedtime stories, prepared delicious meals, and offered warm smiles to Splendor and Emmanuel. Yet, as night descended and the world hushed, enveloping the house in shadows, I transformed into a different being altogether, one who was intertwined with Zach in ways I had never experienced with anyone else. One evening, after the children were tucked into bed, Zach discovered me in the living room, diligently folding laundry. Brianna had departed that morning for yet another work trip, leaving the house in an unusual silence. He lingered in the doorway, observing me, his aura saturating the room long before he uttered a word. "Do you ever take a break from your work?" he inquired, a hint of amusement in his tone. I glanced upward, a smile breaking through my resolve. "It's essential that someone maintains the operation of this place." He moved across the room and settled next to me, our thighs lightly touching. "You truly are remarkable, did you realize that?" I chuckled quietly, shaking my head. "I'm simply fulfilling my responsibilities." "No," he said, his tone now grave. "You are beyond that. Your contributions to this family surpass anything Brianna or I could ever achieve." A wave of guilt washed over me at the sound of her name. "It's best not to express that." "Why not? It is indeed true." I averted my eyes, concentrating on the heap of garments before me. "You have feelings for her, Zach. She is your spouse." He let out a deep sigh, his fingers tangling in his hair. "I care for her deeply, yet not in the manner that I ought to. This isn't how I feel for you." His words lingered in the atmosphere, weighty and unmistakable. I felt compelled to express to him that he was mistaken, that he was incapable of truly loving me. That what we were engaged in was merely a misstep. Yet, I found myself unable to, for within me, I recognized that I harbored the same sentiments. He extended his hand, his fingers weaving together with mine. "Aaliyah, gaze upon me." With a sense of hesitation, I raised my gaze to connect with his. The power in his gaze left me momentarily breathless. "You mean everything to me," he said. "I understand this may not be the best choice, yet I find it hard to envision my life without you." The tears I had been suppressing finally flowed, and he enveloped me in his embrace, holding me close as I wept. "I apologize," I murmured. "I never intended for this to occur." "Nor did I," he murmured gently. "However, I have no regrets about it." As the weeks stretched into months, our secret became increasingly difficult to conceal. Brianna's absences allowed us to explore our secret relationship. Yet the times she was present felt intolerable. I steered clear of her whenever possible, feeling a deep sense of shame that kept me from meeting her gaze. She showed me kindness, placed her trust in me, and remained completely oblivious to the treachery brewing within her home. "Aaliyah, you have truly been a gift to this family," she remarked one evening as we gathered in the kitchen. "I can't quite fathom how we got by before you arrived." Her words pierced through me, sharp and unforgiving, yet I managed to conjure a smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Jacob. Please call me Brianna," she said, a light laugh escaping her lips. "You're almost like one of us." Her trust only intensified my guilt, yet it didn't deter me. Every night, once Brianna settled into her slumber, Zach would seek me out. At times, our conversations would flow, while at other moments, we would just embrace, enveloped in the quietude of our surroundings. Frequently, we found ourselves in his bed, entwined in a fervor that erased all other thoughts from my mind. One evening, after Brianna had departed for a weekend conference, Zach and I enjoyed a bottle of wine in the living room. I hadn't intended to indulge, but he was persistent, filling a small glass and playfully coaxing me until I finally took a sip. The warmth of the wine enveloped me, easing the rigid hold of my self-restraint. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his voice deep and languid. "Are you aware of that?" I shook my head, a warm flush creeping across my cheeks. "You're merely expressing that." "I'm not," he said, leaning in closer. You are the most stunning woman I have ever encountered. Before I could reply, he kissed me, his lips enveloping mine in a manner that allowed for no uncertainty. This wasn't merely desire, it was something profound, something neither of us could articulate. His hands found their way to my waist, drawing me nearer, and I felt myself yield entirely. That night, we never made it to the bedroom. Instead, we remained on the living room floor, the flickering light of the fireplace casting shadows on the walls as we became completely absorbed in one another. It was intense, unfiltered, and utterly captivating. The following morning, I found myself nestled in his embrace, the memories of the previous night swirling through my thoughts. I ought to have experienced shame, yet instead. Zach entered the kitchen, his expression gentle. "Good morning," he murmured, pressing his lips gently to my forehead. "Good morning," I responded, making an effort to maintain a calm tone. "We need to have a conversation," he stated, his tone now grave. I acknowledged his insight with a nod, fully aware of its truth. We could no longer maintain the facade that this wasn't occurring. We could no longer sustain the illusion of the world we had built. Yet, even in my agreement, a part of me hesitated to release my grip. The days following that night in the living room drifted by in a blur. Zach and I grew increasingly daring, devoured by the blaze we had sparked. Every moment spent in his company felt like a precious gem, a hidden truth that I held dear yet approached with caution. As we continued to share moments, the weight of guilt only intensified. Brianna came back from her conference the next Monday, her presence in the house a vivid reminder of the life Zach. We were taking it apart, bit by bit. She radiated warmth and cheerfulness, blissfully unaware of the treachery unfolding in the shadows behind her. Observing her engage with the children, I was overcome by a profound sense of shame. She was not worthy of this fate. None of them did. One evening, after Brianna had gone to bed, I found myself sitting on the porch steps, gazing out at the shadowed heavens. The atmosphere was invigorating. The stars twinkled like delicate fragments of crystal. I tightened my scarf around my shoulders, attempting to shield myself from the cold and the tumultuous thoughts racing through my mind. Zach arrived shortly after, his footsteps gentle on the wooden floor. He took a seat next to. We were so close that our shoulders brushed against each other. "You've been silent," he remarked, his tone subdued. "I've been pondering," I said, avoiding his gaze, "about our relationship." I nodded, feeling a constriction in my throat. "Zach, we cannot continue down this path." He let out a deep breath, his fingers combing through his hair. "I understand, it's intricate." "It's not merely intricate," I cut off, my voice quivering. "It is incorrect. You possess a wife, a family, and I do as well. I've become completely absorbed in this. I can hardly identify myself these days." He extended his hand toward mine, his touch soft and tender. "You remain uniquely you, Aaliyah. You are the one who cherishes my children as if they were your own, the one who has revived the spirit of this home. Don't allow this to destroy it all." I withdrew my hand, tears welling in my eyes. "However, it has, Zach. Can't you understand? We have completely destroyed everything." For the first time, his calm demeanor faltered. "I love you, Aaliyah," he said, his voice trembling. "I cannot bear the thought of losing you." His words pierced me like a blade. I had deep feelings for him as well, that was undeniable now. Yet, affection alone couldn't mend the wounds we had inflicted. "I love you too," I whispered, the confession rolling out before I could halt it. "However, this is tearing me apart." In the week that followed, I came to a conclusion. I realized I had to leave, not in this way. The burden of our actions was overwhelming, and I could no longer reside in a home constructed on falsehoods. I started my discreet search for a new position, contacting agencies and families looking for a nanny. It was quite a challenge. I had developed a deep bond with Splendor and Emmanuel, and the idea of parting ways with them shattered my heart. Yet, I understood it was the sole path to my salvation. One evening, as I was tucking Splendor into bed, she gazed up at me with her wide blue eyes and asked, "Aaliyah, are you leaving?" Her question took me by surprise. "What makes you think that, darling?" "You've been feeling down," she stated plainly, "and Dad says that people tend to go away when they're feeling this way," gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm staying put for the moment, Splendor. It's time to get some rest, all right." She nodded, her eyes gently fluttering shut. As I exited the room, her words echoed in my thoughts. Individuals depart when they feel sorrowful. She was indeed correct. I was departing, for I could no longer remain in a space that had transformed into a confinement of my own design. 2 weeks later, I submitted my resignation. Brianna stood there, her face reflecting a blend of bewilderment and worry. "Aaliyah, is everything all right?" she inquired, placing her coffee cup on the counter with a deliberate motion. "Indeed, Mrs. Jacob," I replied, maintaining a calm tone. "However, I've received an offer for a different position. And I believe it's time for me to transition to a new opportunity." She appeared truly wounded. "Your presence has truly been invaluable to this family. Are you certain about this?" I nodded, my gaze falling away from hers. "I am confident." Zach remained quiet when I shared the news with him. He simply nodded, his jaw clenched, his eyes brimming with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. Fury, sorrow, remorse. "I suppose I can't sway your thoughts, can I?" he inquired softly. "No," I stated, my voice resolute. "I must complete this task." The day I departed was filled with mixed emotions. Splendor and Emmanuel held onto me tightly, their tearful farewells shattering my heart. Brianna embraced me warmly, expressing her gratitude for all I had done for their family. And Zach. Zach lingered quietly by the door, his hands tightly balled into fists at his sides. As I placed my suitcase into the taxi, a peculiar sense of relief washed over me. The dwelling that had served as both my sanctuary and my confinement receded into the horizon as the vehicle drove off. Uncertainty loomed ahead. Yet one truth resonated within me. I needed to rediscover who I truly was. I needed to rediscover the beliefs and principles I had left behind. And I needed to let go of all my past mistakes. That evening, in the modest apartment I had rented across town, I found myself kneeling on the floor, praying for the first time in months. A wave of tranquility enveloped me. I wasn't flawless, and I had my share of missteps. However, I was prepared to begin anew. Hello, all. If you found this tale captivating and wish to explore more narratives like this, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe for more astonishing stories each week. Be sure to enable notifications, ensuring you stay updated with every new development. Feel free to share your own wild stories or ideas you'd like us to bring to life in the comments.